Microsoft Excel 2003 Pivot Tables and Charts. Here we will take a look at the big kahuna of the analysis world, the pivot table, the ability to track and trend the data that is included in our worksheets and our workbooks. One of the most well-known features that Excel has is the ability to do pivot tables and charts based upon data that it has in the spreadsheets and in the workbooks. So we're going to take a look at how we create these pivot tables, how we manipulate the data in and out of the table, and then finally chart what we have in that pivot table. Take a look at what we're going to do here, folks. Step around. I know we gush a lot about some of the features that we have with Excel 2003, and I'm going to gush some more about this one. Mostly because pivot table reports really take these large complex sets of data that we have and we can manipulate them on the fly. In fact, if you think about it, the pivot table really is just the ability to move things in and move things out. You pivot it in, you pivot it out. So if we want to look at the sales numbers for one region, we can put that in. Maybe we want to look at those sales numbers by type. We can put that in and remove the region. So we can instantly analyze and even update the information in these on the fly. So let's go ahead and open up my sales figures here. We've seen this one before, and we have our information here, our month, our year, salesperson, sales, units, type, and region for our Acme produce selling company here. And so one of the things you might want to know first off, before you even jump into the pivot table wizard, is make sure when you are putting the data together that the first row that you have for your columns is your column headers. Month, year, whatever it is that you are measuring in the data that you put on. And the reason why is because when you run the wizard, by default, it's going to say, oh, what's the first row? I bet you these are the column headers for the data. And it's going to take these and use them as the names for the fields. So when you go, I want to check salesperson data, that's what it's going to show up as, or sales data, or units. So whatever you put up here will show up in the wizard, as we'll see just momentarily. So my recommendation is use something up here that you will recognize once you get into the pivot table actual wizard. Speaking of the wizard, the way that we get to it is to go up to the data, pivot table, and pivot chart report wizard. And we're off to see the wizard, the wonderful pivot table Wizard of Oz here. And what we're going to do is we want to say, where is the data that you want to analyze? Now, obviously, we have it right here on our worksheet that we want to look at, and that would be the Microsoft Office Excel list or database, which is right here. You can also choose an external data source like an ODBC. You can also do multiple consolidation ranges. Well, we're going to stick for demonstration purposes in this video series just with what we have in our Excel spreadsheets. Just understand you can do it. If you click this external data source, it would then say, hey, where do you want to get the data from? We can also choose what kind of report we want to create, pivot table, or do you want the pivot table report as well as a pivot chart with it? In this case, let's stick with the pivot table. I'll show you how to create the pivot table, and then once you have it, you can create this pivot chart quite easily. You don't have to do it here. They're just giving you the option. So we click next, and it says, hey, where is the data that you want to use? Now look at how nice Excel is. It says, I'm assuming, based upon what you have on this worksheet, that you want all of this information. And so it does A1 all the way to G21, takes the whole thing. You can change this, by the way, obviously by just clicking here and then selecting it yourself. In this case, it's the exact same thing that we saw before. So we go ahead and say, yep, that's what we want. We want that particular data. Then you can click next, and it says, where do you want to put the pivot table report? Do you want to create a brand new worksheet, so you'll have sheet number 4 down here, or do you want to use one of the existing worksheets? In this case, since I already know I don't have anything on sheet 2, I'm going to use an existing worksheet, click the selection tool, come down here and hit sheet 2. Now, you can't just hit sheet 2 and then click on the drop down arrow and try to make it work, because it'll say, you never really said where you want me to do this. You have to click on one of the cells, so that way it knows where you want to place it. Not only that, but let's say you actually have data here on sheet 2, but you want the pivot table to show up down here. Well, that's where you'd click, and that's why it wants to know. We'll go ahead and stick up here. And then we click down, and it says, all right, you need to click finish. We click finish, and here is our pivot table. Now watch what it says. It gives you a clue on where you want to drag your items. You can put your row fields here. You can put your column fields here. And then the data that you're going to analyze comes in here. For example, if I want to, I can come over here to the pivot table field list, select the salesperson. I want to measure salespeople's sales. So I bring in the row fields here, and it automatically goes in and says, oh, I think you're going to probably want to total or sum these particular entities, Bob, Christina, Dan, Debbie, and James, who have sold things. And look at this. I can even filter this later on if I want by deselecting and only looking at maybe Debbie or Dan or Bob or Christina and James, depending on what I want to do. Let's go ahead and click cancel, and then we can see that right now what we're focusing on right here is where the salesperson is. What about the column fields here? Well, what I can do there is, let's say I want to see what type that they are selling. So I go and put the type right here, and look, it gives beverages, fruit, meat, vegetable, and then the grand total of all of them. So I'm getting already some formula functionality here, as we can see. And by the way, you can change that, how it comes up with this information, whether you want to total it, whether you want to average it, you want to minimize it, functions, those type of things are all right there. And again, I can hide. I can say, you know what, I don't want to see meat. So I take off meat, and now see beverages, fruit, and vegetable only show up. Or I can just say show all, and it selects all of them. So once I've done this, the next thing I'm going to want to do is put what is the data that I'm going to be measuring? The sales, right? So I take the sales and I drag it right into there, the data items. And there you go. It automatically populates the table based upon what it is that I've put in here. So in this case, I've got salesperson, Bob through James, the type, there's their sales. Christina sold beverages of 14,221. And then you also have the fruit and whatever it is. It's all right here. And then they'll give you the grand totals of wherever you need them to be. So now what we're going to do is take a look at what happens when I need to change something in here. Now the first thing I might want to do is say, you know what? I don't want the salesperson in here. I want it by region and type. So what I do is I select it, drag it off, and notice how it says, oh, you want to delete that part. No problem. I can then say, no, I want the region to be over here in the columns. So I place it there, and now look at this. I got my beverages. How many were sold in the east? How many meats were sold in the east, and the vegetables in the north, and the west, and the south. And so I can see how that simple that was? I just select what I want and place it in here based upon whatever it is that I have. I can even add it in more information or change the type. Maybe I want to put the units now instead of the sales. So I can take the units here instead and add it to there. And now look at this. I've got the sum of sales. I've got the sum of units. All of this based on east, based on type, and I'm merely moving data in and moving it out. It's that simple for me to do. So once I've done this, I can then say, okay, this looks good. I can kind of see the trends. I can see that. Maybe I want to create a chart based on this information. By the way, if I want to, I can also change what it does here. Not only can I do a sum, I can also do averaging and everything. And I can also change the format of how my data appears. Merely by clicking on any one of these, we'll just tick this one right here. So I right click on it, it brings up all my list of available things I can do, and one of them is my field settings. By the way, I can do my field settings up here on my pivot table toolbar that has also appeared, if I didn't point that out ahead of time. So I say, all right, I want to do the field settings, and it says right now that field setting is based on summarized by sum. I could do count if I want to. Average, the max, the product, the count numbers. I can do a whole bunch of things that we can see. We'll stick with the sum. But let's say I want to create this as a dollar amount. Well, I can do that by clicking on the number, which will bring up my format for the cells, and we could say currency. I want to show up as currency. So I click OK, and then click OK again, and now look, now it's all put together. Everywhere from this point of my sum of units is going to be in currency. Well, then I look at it and go, oh no, that's wrong. I didn't want that. That's the units sold, and I made it as numbers instead of the actual sales. So again, I can either use the undo button, which will take it back, and then come up here and do it up here instead. So I say field settings, sum of sales, good, number. This is the one I want for currency. I click OK, and now I click OK. Now that looks a lot better. Now I can see actual numbers of the sales in dollar amount and currency, and I can see the sum of the units right here with the 9086. And all of this, of course, giving me the capability of manipulating and analyzing my data any way that I want. Now it's time to actually create a chart out of this. Because remember, I said at the beginning, you can do it all in one kit and caboodle with the wizard, or you can create the pivot table and then create the chart. The way that we do this is we can select anywhere within here and then say, you know what? We want to use the chart, the wizard right here next to the format report. So I hit the chart wizard and it says, okay, here is a chart. And notice what it did. It went ahead and created the chart as its own unit right here. Off of sheet 2 is where I have my pivot table, and here is my chart 1. Now, watch this. I can change the field buttons and how it displays right here. I can come up here and say region, and let's say I only want to show the south and west, and I click OK. Well, it'll show me the south and the west. It shows me the type. If I only want to see the fruit, I can deselect these and just click the fruit. Click OK. I can see the chart here. And all of this is just variable as I move through. So I can click Show All over here and then click OK and then click Show All here. And I can do that. And the data, I can do the Show All here. And I can change things as I need to. But again, this is all done on the chart that I've created right here with the Chart Wizard. So I'm going to click on this and it's going to give me the selection here that I have, my whole entire chart. And let's say I wanted to go ahead and change the chart type. All I need to do is come up to here to chart, click on chart type, and then I get the very familiar standard types of chart. I can do the bar chart, the line chart, the area, the donut, the surface, the bubbles, whatever I need to do for this. In this case, maybe I want to change it over to a bar chart. So I click OK, and then it merely just changes it to where I need it to be. And again, this gives me now the ability to come in here, and then if anything changes here, it's going to change on the chart. Now, how would I get this information to change? Well, let's say I go to the sheet 1 here, pop on back here, and I decide I want to go ahead and change some of the sales numbers. Bob comes in and says, you know what, my numbers went up a little bit. Now remember this number, 2666, right there for the salesperson for Bob for meat here. So the total sales, or we could say the sales type of vegetables. The units here, he sold 10,000 right here. So we'll put 10,000. Okay, so I hit that. Now if I come over here to sheet 2, my numbers haven't really changed at all, have they? Well, all I need to do is make sure that I refresh the data. Now the way that I can do this is by merely coming up here and clicking on refresh data. And when I do that, if you notice, the numbers, the sum of units change down here to 10,000. And if I go to the chart now, I'm going to get my sum of the units here for my vegetables. If I want to look at my vegetables right there, they've now increased. And so again, all I've done is gone in, I've made some changes, I hit refresh the data, and it's going to show me the results of what has happened because of what I've done here. As promised, we did some gushing, didn't we, about pivot tables in the charts, the things that we can do. Number one, how to create the table based upon the data that we have. Then we manipulate the table by moving sections and titles and types of data in and out. And then finally, we went ahead and we said, hey, we want to create this chart of this table so that way we can show people and how we update it in real time. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.